Hey everyone, Ryan Young, KAATARO Jiu-Jitsu. I hope you're doing well. You know, I go over on and on about the need for a curriculum and a methodology when learning Jiu-Jitsu, and it needs to be successful quickly, right? Having people learn Jiu-Jitsu to a very high level in 3 years is not unheard of. It is possible, but you need to have a good system, right? If you're just doing this random stuff, you won't be able to do it. You know, it kind of made me think about a show that I like to watch. It's called Wheeler Dealers, and it's about this guy who buys old beat-up cars and refurbishes them and then sells them. Well, one of the cars that he had really faulty wiring. It was an old car, and you know the wires get eaten up by rats and stuff like that. You know, a lot of old cars that you don't drive that may sit around. You know, they get to it, they destroy all the wiring. So he had a car that had destroyed wiring. Now, I can't work on cars for anything in the world, right? I can check the oil. I can add water to the windshield water. I've changed bulbs in the headlamp before. But anyway, you know, that's kind of like the level of my ability to fix automobiles. But, you know, even for people who are seasoned mechanics and technicians, setting up a wiring harness from scratch is not all that easy. So what they'll do is you'll just go and buy one that's pre-done for your car. Well, let's say your car is 40 years old and you can't find a wiring harness for your car that's already pre-made because there's really no market for it. So nobody's going to make it to put it out onto the store shelves to have nobody buy it. So what he did, his name is Jim, I think. I don't remember his name. What he did was he sought out a shop that specializes in that, in creating wiring harnesses for various vehicles. Now you got to remember that you got to have a certain type of wire. You got to have, you know, a car may have 103 connections, so you have to have 103 wires, but each wire may need to be a different type of wire, right? Different color, different gauge, all that kind of stuff. And you know, trying to navigate that is crazy. But then you also have to understand the wire lengths, right? Because some wires may connect at the front of the vehicle, while others may connect at the very back of the vehicle. So what he did was he went to this one place that specializes in it, and they do old cars. But what they did was they put up, it was like a big, like the size of a chalkboard, right? A large chalkboard. And it had a bunch of nails that were in it in a various pattern. And that's what he had, it was a jig. And it was with this jig, he could then create a wiring harness for pretty much any car. And he would have a certain diagram, a jig that was done a certain way for a certain car, and he'd put that up, and he'd have a technician go and string wires, you know, the correct wires, the correct length, and they kind of would move around like this. So by moving around like this, it makes the wire longer when it gets from point A to point B, right? Some of them were straight across, right? But what he would do is he'd be able to create these jigs, and it probably took 20 minutes to create a wiring harness for this car that this guy had that, you know, there's no wiring harness in existence for it on the market. So he had it custom made. But this company, they have jigs for all kinds of cars. So now how does this kind of play into what we're talking about here with regard to the curriculum? The curriculum is a jig. Now, why is a jig important? Well, let's say the demand for this particular car picks up, and every single one of them has a wiring harness issue. Well, this specialty shop that has a jig can basically take all the people who need a wiring harness, and he can just go and create one in 20 minutes. Easy, right? But he doesn't know how much business there is going to be, so he's not going to go and create them and put them out on the market. Instead, he'll just do them to order, and you know, people will pay that amount for them, whatever amount it was that he charged. And the wiring harness will be all set and good to go. Well, if, you know, at the same time, he could switch a jig and he could do another car, switch a jig and do another car. So you only have to create the jig once, and after that, you can create wiring harnesses all day long. So now with regard to a good curriculum in Jiu-Jitsu, you just need to create it once, okay? Now, there may be instances where you might need to tweak it. You might need to tweak the jig a little bit, right? Maybe, you know, for instance, the way we do what we call the LEO guard pass, you know, guard pass 1 as we call it, it's been refined over the years. It's still the same pass. It's just the weight is done differently. There's connection now. you know, to your opponent so that you can put more pressure on your opponent. But all that would be is just changing a part of the jig, just tweaking a little bit. So let's say it turns out that, you know, the red wire on the jig is 3 inches too long when it's done. You know, and people end up always having to cut that wire when they install in the car. Well, they can adjust the jig so that the wire comes out 3 inches shorter so people don't have to cut anymore. And it's the same thing with your concepts in Jiu-Jitsu. You could have one where people are able to escape. So, okay, how can we do it so they can't escape? Well, you have to work on your connection better. You have to connect to your opponent. You have to put your weight in a certain spot. And once you do that, then the pass works like a charm. So that would be an example of using the same jig, but simply moving one of the anchors around a little bit, tweaking it, so that it becomes a little more effective, a little easier to use, so on and so forth. So for those of you who are still kind of not bought in on using a curriculum, consider it, because it does make things easier. Right? It is easier to replicate things. It is easier to remember things, especially, you know, you look at all the concepts that we learn in Jiu-Jitsu. The hardest part is just trying to remember everything, especially with how Jiu-Jitsu is evolving. Now, if you've got the whole thing, the whole concept about jig down, right, and you know that there's a jig to passing an open guard, right? There's a methodology to passing open guard. Somebody does it a little differently. You can look at it, you can evaluate it and go, okay, is it similar in mind to is it similar to mine conceptually? You can go, actually yes, but instead of putting the left foot this way, he puts the left foot that way. That could be a tweak. So you could easily deal with that pass, or you can use the tweak and you can adopt it into your jig. So that's just a concept that I want you guys to kind of chew on for now. And let me know if you have any questions on it, because this is a particularly valuable concept in your learning. So if you have any questions, go ahead and comment below. In the meantime, come visit us at any of our 3 campuses, or right in California, Flower Mound, Texas, or Austin, Texas, or come and see us and our curriculum and our jig, so to speak, our jigs, at KAATAROonline.com. We'd love to see you there. Anyway, take care. Happy training. Bye now.